There are moments in a hospital that happen in complete silence and are somehow the loudest things you have ever witnessed. Dora Reyes was in the third-floor corridor of Peterson Regional Medical Center in Kerrville, Texas, on a Wednesday afternoon in November when she heard it. Not a scream, not crying. Something quieter than both of those things and more devastating than either. The voice of an old man saying, with the kind of exhausted clarity that comes from saying something too many times to people who are not listening, "I don't want to go." She stopped walking. The door to room 318 was open about 4 inches. Through the gap, she could see the edge of a hospital bed. A window with the hill country visible through it in that specific November gold that makes the cedar and live oak look like they are lit from inside. And a nurse, young, professional, clearly uncomfortable, holding a clipboard and not making eye contact with the man in the bed. And she could see the man in the bed. He was 79 years old. She would learn that later. In that first moment, through a 4-inch gap in a hospital door, what she saw was white hair, veteran's hands, the specific kind of large and weathered that comes from decades of work, and eyes that were completely, absolutely alert. This was not a confused man. This was not a man who did not understand what was happening to him. This was a man who understood exactly what was happening and was watching it happen anyway, because the person making it happen had papers and a voice, and the particular confidence of someone who believes that having paperwork is the same as being right. That person was standing with his back to the door. Dora could not see his face yet. She could see his posture. Straight, impatient, the posture of someone who has decided the conversation is already over and is waiting for the other people in the room to catch up to that fact. He was saying something about arrangements and timelines and what was best. The old man in the bed said, "I don't want to go." Again. The same 4 words with the same exhausted clarity. Not angry, not dramatic, just true. Dora pushed the door open and walked in. She had not planned to do this. She had been on her way to room 331 to visit Carmen's chapter member, a woman named Patrice who had just had knee surgery and who Dora had promised to check on. She had taken a wrong turn at the elevator. She was 3 rooms past where she meant to be. Sometimes the road takes you exactly where you need to go by taking you somewhere you did not intend. She walked in and she said, "Sorry to interrupt. I'm looking for room 331. And while she said it, she looked at the old man in the bed, and she saw something cross his face that she had seen before. That specific flicker of a person who has been alone in a bad situation and has just registered that someone else has entered the room. Not rescue yet, not even hope yet. Just the awareness that the geometry of the situation has changed. He looked at her vest, the iron Magnolia patch, the Road King keyring on her jacket pocket. And then he said the thing that changed everything. He said, "My wife had one of those patches. She rode until she was 71. The man with the clipboard turned around. Dora did not look at him yet. She was looking at the old man and she said, "Tell me about her." What happened over the next 6 hours in Peterson Regional Medical Center in Kerrville, Texas, on a Wednesday in November, would involve a hospital administrator, a family law attorney, a social worker, 4 Iron Magnolia riders, and a story about a woman named Ruth that nobody in that room had heard before. And it started because Dora Reyes took a wrong turn at an elevator. Kerrville sits in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, where Ranch Road 1340 meets the Guadalupe River, and the hills roll in every direction with that particular combination of cedar and limestone that makes the hill country look like no other place in Texas. Riders know this region the way musicians know certain chords. By feel, by the way it resonates. FM 1340 River Road along the Guadalupe, the stretch of TX16 between Kerrville and Medina, where the road curves through the hills in long, smooth arcs that make a well-tuned Harley feel like it was designed specifically for that asphalt. This is where the Twisted Sisters, FM 335, FM 336, FM 337, twist through Leakey and Camp Wood in loops so tight and scenic that riders plan entire trips around them the way other people plan trips around national parks. Dora had been riding this country since she was in her 20s. When her Road King was a used 1998 model she had bought with 3 months of saved wages and ridden hard from the day she got it. She knew every elevation change on TX16. She knew the particular way the light hit the Guadalupe at 7 in the morning in October, copper and clean, and she knew the specific smell of cedar when the temperature drops fast in November. Sharp and dry and real in a way that city air never is. She had come to Kerrville for a specific reason that had nothing to do with Harold Simmons. Patrice Wheeler, chapter member, Austin Iron Magnolia, 12 years in the club, had gone in for a knee replacement at Peterson Regional 3 days earlier. Dora had called twice. She had sent food through Carmen, and on Wednesday, she had gotten on the Road King at 7 a.m., taken TX-16 south from Kerrville where she had stayed overnight, and arrived at the hospital by 8:30. She had parked in the hospital lot between a pickup truck and a minivan, which always felt slightly absurd. A Road King in a hospital parking lot is like an eagle sitting on a park bench. Technically fine, but somehow wrong. She had taken off her helmet and her gloves and tucked them under her arm and walked through the sliding doors and told the woman at the front desk she was here to see Patrice Wheeler in room 331. "Third floor," the woman said. "Elevators on your left." Dora took the elevator. She got off on the 3rd floor. She turned right instead of left. Room 318, 4 inches of open door. An old man's voice saying, "I don't want to go." Harold Eugene Simmons had been born in Comfort, Texas in 1945, which made him 79 years old and a man whose entire life had been lived within a 40-mile radius of the hill country, except for 2 years in Vietnam, which he did not talk about much, and a road trip in 1987 with his wife Ruth on their matched pair of Harley-Davidson Electroglides that had taken them from Kerrville all the way up the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia and North Carolina and back down through the Smoky Mountains on US 129, the Dragon, the 11 miles of 318 curves that every serious rider in America has on their list, before looping back west on old Route 66 through Amarillo and down through Lubbock and home. He had a photograph of that trip on the nightstand in his hospital room. Dora would notice it in the first few minutes. A Polaroid, faded to that warm yellow that Polaroids get with age, of 2 people on 2 motorcycles at an overlook somewhere on the Blue Ridge, with the Appalachian ridgeline disappearing into haze behind them. The man was younger and thinner, but recognizably Harold. The woman next to him was tall, dark-haired, laughing at something off-camera with the specific abandon of someone who is exactly where they want to be. That was Ruth. Ruth Elaine Simmons, née Castañeda, had been born in Uvalde, Texas in 1947 and had learned to ride on her older brother's motorcycle at 15, which in 1962 in a small Texas town was not something that women did. And Ruth had done it anyway with the cheerful stubbornness that Harold would describe as the defining characteristic of every day of their 51 years of marriage. She had ridden a BSA Thunderbolt until 1971, when Harold, who was by then working at his father's hardware store in Kerrville and doing reasonably well, had surprised her with a Sportster for her birthday. Ruth had cried, which was the only time Harold ever saw her cry except for their wedding and the day their daughter was born. And then she had ridden that Sportster for 11 years before trading up to the Electroglide that was in the photograph. She had ridden until she was 71 years old, just as Harold had told Dora through the gap in the door. She had stopped not because she wanted to, but because her eyes had started going in the way that eyes go at 71 when you have spent decades riding in Texas sun. And she had made the decision herself, on her own terms, the way she made every decision. And she had parked the Electroglide in the garage and covered it with the same canvas tarp she had always used, and she had never ridden it again. She had died of a heart attack at 76, 5 years before Harold's AVC, in the house on Junction Highway where they had lived for 43 years. The Electroglide was still in the garage, still under the canvas tarp. Harold had not been able to make himself sell it. Edward Simmons was Harold's son from his first marriage, a marriage that had lasted 2 years in the early 1970s, and ended in a divorce that Harold described simply as a mutual recognition that they had made a mistake and were both adult enough to admit it. Eddie was 51 years old. He lived in Dallas, where he worked in commercial real estate and had done well enough to have opinions about what was best for his father that arrived with the confidence of someone whose opinions had mostly gone unchallenged. He was not a villain. Dora would be clear about that in her own mind from early on. He was a man who had decided what needed to happen and had organized himself around making it happen without spending quite enough time asking whether it was what his father wanted. There is a version of that kind of behavior that comes from selfishness and a version that comes from fear. And in Eddie's case, Dora would eventually conclude It was mostly the second one. The fear of a son who does not live nearby and is trying to manage from a distance something that cannot be managed from a distance, which is the health and autonomy and daily life of an aging parent. But fear as a motive does not make the outcome less harmful. And the outcome that Eddie was organizing was this. Harold, who had lived his entire life in Kerrville except for Vietnam and the road trip, who knew every person at his church and every waitress at the Cowboy Steakhouse on Water Street, and every trail along the Guadalupe that his knees still allowed him to walk, was going to be moved to a long-term care facility in Plano, 40 minutes outside of Dallas, where Eddie could check on him more easily. Harold did not want to go to Plano. Harold had said this. Clearly, calmly, repeatedly. He had said it to Eddie. He had said it to the hospital social worker who had visited once and left a pamphlet. He had said it to the nurse with the clipboard, who was young and overwhelmed and caught between the patient's stated wishes and the family member with the medical power of attorney, who was standing in the room with paperwork and a tone of voice that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted. And then he had said it to the door. And the door had opened. Dora pulled the chair from the corner of the room and sat down next to Harold's bed. She did this without asking permission, which was deliberate. Asking permission in this situation would have given Eddie the opportunity to object. And Eddie clearly was someone who would take that opportunity. She sat down the way she sat down in difficult situations, like she had always been there and intended to stay. Eddie opened his mouth. Dora looked at him for the first time. She said calmly, "I'll be with you in just one moment." And then she looked back at Harold. Harold was looking at her with an expression that she would think about for a long time afterward. Not gratitude yet, not even relief yet. Something more like the look of a man who has been talking to a wall for 3 days and has suddenly noticed that the wall has eyes. "Tell me about your wife," Dora said. "Tell me about her patches." Harold looked at the photograph on the nightstand. He looked back at Dora. "You actually want to know?" he asked, not sarcastically, with genuine uncertainty, like he had stopped expecting that question to get a real answer. "I actually want to know," Dora said. Eddie said, "This is not really the time," Dora said without looking at him. "It's exactly the time." She said it the way she said everything that mattered, quietly, without drama, like a fact. Harold's hands moved on the blanket, those veterans' hands large and weathered, finding each other the way hands do when a person is about to say something that matters. "Her name was Ruth," he said. "She was from Uvalde. She learned to ride on her brother's BSA when she was 15 years old." And Harold Simmons started talking. He talked for 40 minutes without stopping. Dora did not interrupt. The nurse with the clipboard stood near the door for a while and then quietly left. Eddie sat down in the chair by the window, which Dora noted. Sitting down is a different posture than standing with papers, and the decision to sit down meant something, even if Eddie did not fully know yet what it meant. Harold talked about the BSA and the Sportster and the Electra Glide. He talked about the road trip in 1987, how they had left Kerrville on a Tuesday in June with no firm itinerary, just the general agreement that they were going to ride the Blue Ridge Parkway before the summer crowds made it impossible. How they had taken US 290 east to Austin, and then cut north on I-35 toward Dallas, and then picked up US 67 to get away from the interstates. Because Ruth hated interstates. She said they were designed for getting places, not for riding. And she was not interested in getting places. She was interested in riding. He talked about how they had crossed into Arkansas on small roads and how the Ozarks in June felt like a different country, green and close and full of birdsong. So different from the limestone openness of the hill country that they had both gone quiet for long stretches, just riding and looking, which was the best version of being together that Harold knew of. He said, "We could be together and not talk for 200 miles, and it was never uncomfortable. Some people you can be quiet with. Ruth was the only person I ever found that I could be quiet with at 75 miles an hour." He talked about the Dragon, US 129 through the Smoky Mountains, Deals Gap, the 11 miles and 318 curves that eat lesser riders and reward the ones who know how to be humble in front of a road that is smarter than they are. He said Ruth had ridden it twice without stopping, and that on the second run she had been grinning so hard under her helmet that she was still grinning when they stopped at the overlook on the Tennessee side, and he could see it in her eyes above the face shield. He talked about the stretch of old Route 66 from Oklahoma City west through Elk City and through the Texas Panhandle past Amarillo, where the road becomes so straight and so flat and so absolutely itself that it stops being a road and becomes a kind of argument about what roads are for. He said Ruth had opened up the Electroglide on that stretch until the speedometer was doing things he preferred not to specify, and she had looked over at him with those dark eyes above her face shield, and he had thought, I am the luckiest man on this road and probably on any road. He talked about coming home, how they had taken US 87 south from Amarillo through San Angelo and then cut west on TX 29 toward Mason and come into Kerrville from the east on TX 27 as the sun was going down, and how the hill country had looked in that light like something that had been waiting for them specifically, and how Ruth had said, when they pulled into their driveway and cut the engines and the silence arrived, I would ride that again tomorrow. She never got to, Harold said. Life got in the way. The kids were older by then, but there was always something. Work. The grandkids. You know how it is? You say next year and then next year is something else. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the bike is still in the garage, under a canvas tarp. I kept thinking I'd do something with it. I never could. She understood several things at once, sitting in that chair next to Harold Simmons's hospital bed while the November Hill country light came through the window, and Eddie sat very still by the wall. She understood that Harold was not primarily afraid of the care facility in Plano. He was afraid of leaving Kerrville, which was the place where Ruth had been, where their life had happened, where the garage with the Electroglide under the canvas tarp was. He was afraid of leaving the last physical proximity to her. Moving to Plano was not just a change of address. It was a severing. She understood that Eddie did not know about Ruth and the motorcycles, not the depth of it, not what it had meant. He had been raised by his own mother, not Ruth, and had come into Harold's life as an adult, at a respectful but genuine distance. And the 40-minute check-in visits he described had not, apparently, included the kind of long, slow conversations in which Harold would have told these stories. She understood that the nurse with the clipboard was not the enemy, and that Eddie was not entirely the enemy, and that what this situation needed was not a confrontation, but a reorientation, a shifting of the frame large enough that the right decision became visible to everyone in the room. And she understood one more thing. She understood that Harold Simmons, 79 years old, veteran, widower, man with veteran's hands and completely alert eyes, was not a person who needed to be protected from his own choices. He was a person who needed someone to stand next to him while he made them. She took out her phone. She texted Carmen, I need Priya and June, and whoever else is within an hour of Kerrville. Peterson Regional, room 318. Not urgent, but important. She put the phone away and looked at Eddie. She said, can I ask you something? Eddie looked at her warily. Sure, he said. When did you last hear your father talk about Ruth? Eddie blinked. He thought about it. We don't really talk about her much, he said. It's been 5 years. Did you know she rode motorcycles for almost 60 years? Eddie looked at Harold. Harold was watching him with the careful patience of a man who has learned to wait. I knew she rode, Eddie said slowly. I didn't know. I knew she had a bike. She rode the Dragon, Harold said quietly. Twice. She rode Route 66. She rode the Blue Ridge. She rode every road in the hill country worth riding. He paused. She was better than me. She was always better than me. The room was very quiet. Dora said, your father doesn't want to leave Kerrville because everything he has left of Ruth is here. That's what this is. Not stubbornness, not confusion. That's a man who knows exactly what leaving means. Eddie looked at the window. He looked at his father. He looked at his hands, which were in his lap, which was a different posture than the one he had arrived with. He did not say anything for a while. It was 2:17 in the afternoon when Dora heard the sound she had been half expecting, the particular resonance of Harley-Davidson engines in a hospital parking lot, which is a combination that does not happen often, but when it does carries its own specific gravity. She stepped to the window. 4 bikes in the parking lot below. June Rivas on her street glide Kerrville chapter. 2 other Iron Magnolia members she recognized from the monthly run through Leakey the previous spring. And, pulling in just behind them, a car. Priya's silver Accord, practical and reliable, the attorney's car that had been to more difficult situations than most police cruisers. She texted June, "Room 318, third floor. Come quiet." June came quiet, all of them did. They were good at reading situations from the doorway. Years of collective experience at understanding what a room needed before you entered it. June took one look at Harold, one look at Eddie, one look at Dora, and positioned herself just inside the door with the specific stillness of someone who is present without being intrusive. The other two Iron Magnolia members stayed in the corridor, which was the right call. Priya came in and introduced herself to Eddie as a family law attorney and a friend, in that order, and sat down across the room with a yellow legal pad and a pen, and did not open her mouth again for 20 minutes, which was deliberate. Harold looked at the doorway. He looked at June. He looked at the Iron Magnolia colors. He said quietly to Dora, "Ruth would have liked this." Dora said, "I think Ruth would have loved this." Harold smiled. It was the first time he had smiled since Dora had walked into the room. It took another hour. Not a fight, not a negotiation. Something harder than both of those things and more necessary. A real conversation between a son and his father about what the father actually needed, which was not the same as what the son had decided he needed. Priya spoke eventually. She explained clearly and without judgment what Harold's legal rights were. She explained what a medical power of attorney did and did not authorize. She explained that Harold was medically competent. His neurologist had assessed him twice and documented it clearly. And that a competent adult's stated wishes regarding his own living situation carried legal weight that paperwork alone did not override. She said all of this in the voice of someone who is presenting information, not winning an argument. And that made all the difference. Eddie asked questions. Good ones, actually. He asked about the level of care Harold needed and whether Careville had facilities that could provide it. Priya had already looked this up. There were 2 assisted living facilities in Careville within 3 miles of Harold's house, one of which had availability and had received strong reviews from the Hill Country Area Agency on Aging. He asked about proximity. "How do I check on him from Dallas? It's 4 hours." June spoke for the first time since arriving. She said, "We can help with that. Not officially, but the Kerrville chapter rides through this neighborhood every month. We know people here. We look out for people here." She paused. "It's what we do." Eddie looked at her. He looked at the 4 Iron Magnolia patches in the room. He looked at his father. Harold said, "I've been here my whole life, Eddie, except for Vietnam and 1 road trip. This is where I belong. This is where your grandmother's jewelry is in the drawer and Ruth's bike is in the garage, and every person who remembers me the way I was when I was young is within 10 miles. I am not confused about this. I know exactly what I want. I want to stay." The room was quiet again. Then Eddie said something Dora did not expect. He said, "I didn't know about the motorcycle. I didn't know what it meant to her, to both of you." Harold looked at his son. Then he said, with a gentleness that was its own kind of strength, "You never asked." Eddie absorbed that. It landed the way things land when they are true, and you know they are true, and you were not ready for them. Then he said, "Tell me about her. Tell me about Ruth." And Harold told him. At 4:15 in the afternoon, with the November Hill Country light going gold and long through the hospital window, Harold asked Dora something she had not expected. He said, "Do you think someone should write it?" Dora understood immediately what he was asking. The Electra Glide in the garage, under the canvas tarp, not ridden in 8 years. She said, "What do you think?" Harold was quiet for a moment. He looked at the photograph on the nightstand. The Blue Ridge Parkway, the 2 Electra Glides, Ruth laughing at something off camera. "I think she would be angry at me for letting it sit," he said. Ruth did not believe in keeping good things covered up and still. She thought machines were meant to run and roads were meant to be ridden, and anything else was a waste of the gift. He looked at Dora. "She said it would be a sin to let a good motorcycle rot," he said. Those were her exact words. A sin. Dora looked at June. June looked at the photograph. She looked at Harold. "Would it be all right," June said carefully, "if the Kerrville chapter took a look at it?" made sure it's in good shape. We wouldn't touch it without your permission. We'd just check on it. Harold was quiet for a long time, longer than felt comfortable. Dora did not rush him. Then he said, Ruth always said that motorcycle was meant for the hill country roads, that it would be wrong to let it end in a garage in Kerrville without ever seeing those roads again. His voice was steady. His hands were still. He said, she would want it ridden. June nodded. It will be, she said. I promise you that. Eddie found Dora in the hallway at 4:45. He had been in with Harold for another 20 minutes, and the conversation she had not been part of had clearly done something to his face. It was a different face than the one he had arrived with. Younger, somehow. Less organized. He said, I want to apologize. Dora looked at him. You don't owe me an apology, she said. I came in here with paperwork and a decision, he said. I didn't ask him what he wanted. I decided what was best and I came in here to implement it. He stopped. I was afraid. He's getting older and I'm 4 hours away and I wanted to fix it from where I was standing. I didn't think about whether the fix fit the person. Dora was quiet for a moment. She said, he's not a problem to be solved from a distance. He's your father, and he's been very specific about what he needs. I know that now, Eddie said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, who are you? I mean, why were you here? You don't know him. I took a wrong turn, Dora said. Eddie looked at her. That's it? That's it, she said. I was going to room 331. I went the wrong way. I heard him say he didn't want to go. I walked in. Eddie thought about this for a moment. He said, most people would have kept walking. Dora looked down the corridor. At the end of it, the window showed the parking lot. The 4 iron Magnolia bikes still there, the hill country hills beyond the hospital roof, the November sky going the particular deep blue that it goes in the hill country at 5 in the afternoon when the temperature starts to fall. Most people are in a hurry to get where they're going, she said. I've been riding long enough to know that the best things that ever happened to me happened when I wasn't where I meant to be. She finally made it to room 331 at 5:20 p.m. Patrice Wheeler was awake, propped up on pillows, knee elevated, watching television with the remote control held loosely in one hand and the expression of a woman who has been in a hospital bed for 3 days and has developed a complicated relationship with daytime programming. She looked at Dora. She said, you were supposed to be here 3 hours ago. I got distracted, Dora said. By what? Dora sat down in the chair by the bed. She thought about where to start. She started at the beginning. The elevator, the wrong turn, the 4 inches of open door, the old man's voice. Patrice listened. She did not interrupt, which was characteristic. Patrice was a listener, had always been. One of the things that had made her valuable to the club for 12 years was the quality of her attention, the way she could sit with someone's story without rushing it toward a conclusion. When Dora finished, Patrice was quiet for a moment. Then she said, his wife rode the dragon? Twice, Dora said, without stopping. Patrice whistled low. In a good Electra Glide, 1976 model according to Harold. Rode it from 1976 to 1987 when she switched to the newer one. Patrice shook her head slowly with the specific appreciation of a writer for another writer's history. Then she said, and the bike is still in the garage, under a canvas tarp for 8 years. Patrice looked at the window. She was quiet for another moment. Then she said, when I get out of here, I want to ride it. Dora looked at her. Harold would have to agree to that. Then ask him, Patrice said. Because Ruth Simmons rode the Dragon and Route 66 and the Blue Ridge and every road in the hill country for 60 years, and that motorcycle deserves to be on a road. Not under a tarp. Dora thought about that for a moment. She said, I'll ask him tomorrow. She went back the next morning. She brought coffee, the good kind, from the place on Water Street in Kerrville that Harold had mentioned the previous afternoon when he was talking about the restaurants he went to with Ruth on Saturday mornings, the ones that still existed and the ones that didn't. Harold was sitting up when she came in. He looked better than the day before, not healthier exactly, but more himself. The specific posture of a man who has said the true things that needed to be said and is living in the aftermath of that, which is its own kind of rest. Eddie had gone back to Dallas. Before he left, he and Harold had talked for 2 hours alone, and whatever had been said in those 2 hours had produced something that neither of them had arrived at the hospital with. An agreement that Harold would explore the assisted living options in Kerrville, that Eddie would come down once a month instead of relying on phone calls, and that they would together go through the house on Junction Highway and decide together what needed deciding. Harold took the coffee and held the cup in both hands and looked at Dora. "You came back," he said. "I said I would," she said. He nodded. Then he said, "I thought about what you said, about the bike." "I didn't say much about the bike," Dora said. "You didn't have to," Harold said. "You said it was meant for the hill country roads. Your friend June said they'd check on it." Dora waited. Harold looked at the photograph on the nightstand. He looked at the coffee in his hands. He looked at Dora. Ruth's 67th birthday would have been next month, he said. December 14th. She always said birthdays were for doing the thing you'd been putting off. Dora felt something in her chest she did not try to name. Harold said, "I want the Iron Magnolia to ride that bike on Ruth's birthday, through the hill country, through the roads she loved. FM 1340 along the Guadalupe, the Twisted Sisters if the weather holds, back through Medina and down through Kerrville at sunset." He looked at her. "Can you do that?" Dora said. "We'll be there." Harold looked at the window. At the hill country hills, the cedar and the limestone, the specific November gold that had been there yesterday and was there again today and would be there long after both of them were gone. He said, "She would have liked you." Dora looked at the photograph on the nightstand. Ruth laughing at something off camera, completely where she wanted to be, on a road that went somewhere worth going. She said, "I think I would have liked her too." The morning of Ruth Simmons' 67th birthday came in cold and clear. The way December mornings come in the hill country when a front has moved through and left the air washed and sharp and full of that specific cedar smell that means Texas winter, even though the temperature will still reach 65 by afternoon. 14 Iron Magnolia riders assembled in the parking lot of Peterson Regional Medical Center at 8 a.m. Harold was there in a wheelchair, wrapped in a coat, with the specific alertness of a man who has been looking forward to something. June had brought the Electra Glide. They had spent 3 days getting it road ready, changing the fluids, checking every system, inflating the tires, cleaning it with the care you bring to something that matters. And it looked extraordinary in the morning light. Cream and black, the 76 model lines, the chrome catching the early sun like it had been waiting for exactly this. Harold looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "That's her bike, all right. That's exactly her bike." June stood next to the Electra Glide. She looked at Harold. She said, "Who rides it today?" Harold looked at the 14 women in Iron Magnolia colors. He looked at Dora. He looked at Patrice, who was 3 weeks out of surgery and had not been supposed to ride yet, but was here anyway, on her Road King, with a knee brace under her riding pants and an expression that dared anyone to comment on it. He said, "The woman who would have ridden it furthest. That's what Ruth always said. A good motorcycle belongs to the rider with the most road left in them." He looked at Patrice. Patrice looked at the Electra Glide. She looked at Harold. She said, "I rode the Dragon last spring." Harold smiled. "That'll do," he said. They rode FM 1340 along the Guadalupe River as the sun came up over the hills, the water copper and still in the morning cold, the cedar on both banks dark and fragrant. They took the Twisted Sisters, FM 335 through the switchbacks above Leakey, FM 336 through the valleys, FM 337 on the long run back east, at a pace that was not fast, that was deliberate. That was the pace of people who are paying attention to the roads they are on because the roads deserve it. Patrice rode the Electra Glide at the front of the formation, in the position of honor, and Dora rode directly behind her, and somewhere on FM 336, in the particular moment when the road crests a hill and the hill country opens up in every direction, and the sky is enormous and blue and the cedar rolls away to the horizon, Dora felt something she did not have an exact name for, but that she recognized. The feeling of a road being ridden the way it was meant to be ridden, by someone who knows what it costs to love a thing and what it costs to lose it, and what it means to honor both of those things by moving through the world anyway, at speed, with the wind doing what wind does. Ruth had felt this, on this road, on the Blue Ridge, on Route 66, On the Dragon, the road does not end. It keeps going long after the rider has stopped, in the shape it makes on the people who rode it, in the stories those people tell, in the woman from Uvalde who learned to ride at 15 on her brother's BSA and rode every road worth riding for the next 56 years and left behind an electric glide under a canvas tarp and a husband who could not sell it. They came back into Kerrville as the sun was going down, exactly as Harold had asked. FM 27 from the east, the hills gold and long-shadowed, the Guadalupe below the bridge catching the last light. Harold was in the parking lot of the hospital when they arrived, still in the wheelchair, still in the coat. His hands were on his knees and his eyes were on the formation coming down the road. When Patrice cut the Electroglide's engine in front of him, he did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "She would have been happy today." It was not a statement that required a response. Dora stood next to him and looked at the hill country going dark to the east and the last gold on the ridge to the west. And she thought about Ruth laughing off camera on the Blue Ridge Parkway in a Polaroid that had faded to warm yellow. And she thought about Harold saying I would ride that again tomorrow, and she thought about the road connecting everything, the living and the dead, the told and the untold, the bikes ridden and the bikes waiting under canvas in garages on Junction Highway. Everything connects. Every road leads somewhere worth going if you are paying attention. She had taken a wrong turn at an elevator. That was all. That was everything.